Back. Joining us in the studio right now is Jeff Younger, and the story of what is happening to his family will break your heart. But he is patient zero, and we're talking about this in the break here. This is a cancer, folks, that is metastasizing across this country, and it's just amazing to me to see how rapidly this is moving. Not just the attack against the First Amendment, but it is a full spectrum attack against our culture, against our Constitution, against our families, and it is coming from every angle, and they're escalating it and broadening this very rapidly. You can find out more about James. He's got a website where you can, I'm sure once you hear his story, you're going to want to help him to fight this. It's savejames.com. Very easy to remember, savejames.com. That is his son. So joining us now is Jeff Younger. Thank you for joining us, Jeff, and telling us about this, because this is something that is going to be is rapidly expanding to everyone. Tell us the story of your son, James, who is 6 years old and now is in danger of having sex change surgery and I guess chemical castration, right?
It's a real menace that could happen as early as 8, and he's almost 7 now. So
wow.
The way it started, my ex-wife, Ann Georgelis, she's a pediatrician, believe it or not, in Capel, Texas, unexpectedly, completely out of the blue, just filed for divorce. And it turns out that, I didn't know it at the time, she had been telling James he was a girl since he was 2.
Wow.
So a little bit after his 3rd birthday, we were separated. I was in my home. I had my sons. We had equal time. This is before the divorce. He started telling me he was a girl. And I had the presence of mind to pull up my iPhone. It's the first video I ever took on iPhone. Didn't know how to do it. I had to figure it out on the fly and just videotape that. And he's just barely 3, and he's saying, "Mommy says I'm a girl." And she was putting him in dresses, painting his nails, and this kind of thing. So as we went through the divorce process, there's a custody evaluation that happens. And a guy named Blake Mitchell did our custody evaluation. He's a psychologist in Dallas. And I told him that she was tampering with his gender identity and showed him the video. And in his report, he says he found no evidence that she was doing this. So things just kept going on that way. She registered him in school, preschool. We sent him to Spanish schoolhouse in Capel. And he was just a boy. Even though I had all these concerns, I kept a close watch. On his 5th birthday, she chose that as his coming out party. And he showed up to his 5th birthday with all his church friends in a dress. Then she registered him in school as a girl, changed his name in school to Luna. She can't legally change his name without my consent, but he's known as Luna at the school. He uses the girls' bathroom. None of the parents really know about it. So the issue that I've had is all of his authority figures, his teacher, the police officer at school, the librarian, the principals, the lunch ladies, they all say he's a girl, and I was the only authority figure in his life. Me and his priest were the only authority figures in his life. This said he was actually a boy, and he really didn't believe me for a long period of time.
How did he act when he was around you?
This is the thing. He's never presented as a girl to me. He's only presenting as a girl with his mother. With me and everybody else that I introduce him to, he presents as a boy. And what's strange about it is, despite the fact that he presents as a boy to me, and only with his mom is he a girl, the pediatrician that my ex-wife selected still diagnosed him with gender dysphoria, even though he presents normally to me.
This is crazy when you can have a child, again, at the age of 3 or at the age of 6, they're not thinking about being a different gender. I mean, they're a long ways away from puberty.
Right.
And we have always said in the past that a child has not reached the age of consent. That's one of the reasons why, a child cannot consent to having sex below a certain age. So in many cases, it's 18 years old or whatever, right?
Yes.
But now they can consent to have a sex change, and that can be suggested to them by somebody else.
Yeah.
But you cannot suggest to them that they are what they are biologically. It's okay to gaslight somebody mentally with this, but you can't say, well, no, biologically, this is what you are. Why don't you wait and see and give this some time? No, you're going to push this on a child and chemically castrate someone by the age of 8. This is amazing. This is why this became a national story, and this has become a national story for both sides, hasn't it?
Yes, it has. And there's two proofs for what you say. One is the fact that James presents normally with me gives him a choice of what gender identity we should privilege and which one we should encourage. The psychologist and his pediatrician have chose to encourage the abnormal gender expression inexplicably.
Yeah, the non-biological.
That's correct, the non-biological one. And the courts have put me actually under a number of injunctions. I'm under temporary orders, and I have an actual injunction against me, which says that, and I'll just go through this list. I keep this list on me to make sure I don't violate the law because it's so crazy. I can hardly follow it. So she asked the court for these things. I'm going to put it in the terms that she did. She said she wanted the court to jail me if I ever say James is a boy to someone who knows him as a girl. And that has prevented me from going to school with him or doing any extracurricular activities wherever she presented him as a girl. She wants the court to jail me if I refuse to attend transgender indoctrination classes or if I fail to receive a satisfactory grade by the transgender instructor. She's asked the court that I not use male pronouns and only female pronouns, and that I be held in contempt of court and jailed if I do that. I am enjoined from attempting to even convince my son that he's a boy. That's actually in the injunction.
Wow.
Now that means that I cannot teach him traditional Christian teachings on sexuality and gender.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that means he can't go to Sunday school at my church anymore because we teach out of the book of Genesis.
Wow.
So there's a number of things here. One, these are all prior restraints on parental speech. Prior restraints on speech are totally unconstitutional. We have an unbroken record in the federal court since the Revolutionary War on that. It's a violation of my religious liberty. And I'm finding that this is absolutely routine in family courts. They issue blatantly unconstitutional orders. Finally,
and this is Texas.
This is Texas.
This is Texas.
It's worse elsewhere.
Yeah, exactly. This is not California.
This
is not the UK. This is Texas.
Here's the worst part of it to me, and the part that's probably going to put me in a Texas prison. Currently, under current Texas statutes, there are no exceptions to child support. Texas has been, I think, really good about that, actually. We shouldn't have many exceptions to child support. So medical costs and psychological costs and psychiatric costs are considered child support in the state of Texas. The current reading of the statutes, the plain reading of the statutes and the common law, the case law, is that I am going to have to pay for the chemical castration of my son and the sexual mutilation of my own son in a sex change surgery. And if I don't pay that, I'll be in violation of a statute called criminal non-support. And it's a state jail felony, and they'll put me in a prison here in Texas.
See, this is the issue here, folks. This is not about the individual liberty of adults. This is about coming after children. And it is also about making people who have religious freedoms themselves, it is about making them throw that under the bus and bow down and worship their agenda. This is in Texas, folks. We're not talking about California or New York. We're not talking about the UK. This is in Texas. What you just heard in the last segment and what's going to be coming up here. We're going to talk about some of the perverse incentives that have been put into the judicial system to destroy families. And they are true in any kind of a family dispute. But now his case has become a national case for a very good reason. He's going to tell us about that coming up. Before we get to that, I just want to tell you, if you heard this last segment, I'm sure you're going to want to help to support Jeff in his fight to save his now 7-year-old son from being chemically castrated next year at 8 years old. And if you want to help him, you can go to savejames.com. There is a kind of a GoFundMe, but it's a different organization because GoFundMe actually starting to push back against this because it was, had transgender overtones. And so they're not going to take the side of a father who wants to stand with his son on a biological issue. You started having problems with that, so you had to move it to another site.
Right.
And but you can find that there. You'll see the donate button there at savejames.com. And let's talk a little bit more about this. And of course, as we were going to break, the thing that you said that was likely going to land you in jail, your wife had gotten a whole bunch of different issues there about what you could say and could not say, prior restraints on your speech. But the big issue is that they're going to try to force you as a father to pay for the chemical castration of your son. As you said, you're not going to do that. That may wind you up in jail if it gets to that point.
Yeah, I can't be more clear about this. I am absolutely never going to participate in the abuse of my son.
Yeah.
Ever.
Good for you.
Now, I have been extraordinarily patient in my point of view as a Texan male, Texan man, born and bred here from Dumas, Texas. I've been extraordinarily patient. You know, I get electronic communication with my child every day. I get FaceTime with my sons. When I talk to my sons in the evening, every single time I call, I see my son being abused. He's in eyelashes, he's in makeup, he's in dresses, okay? And he's being told he's a girl. And I have to see that every day. And guess what? I'm the one that has to be calm. I'm the one that has to be careful what I say.
It's just amazing to me how this is switched. And talk about why this is such an important case nationally. I mean, people on our side of the issue who are saying that children cannot make these kinds of determinations, and you need to leave very young children alone. Let them, if they have an issue with something like this, let them make that determination as an adult. We've got many, many cases of people who have made a transition as an adult, had a sex change operation, said it was the worst thing I've ever done. Regret that as an adult.
Yes.
But now we're telling these kids that they can make up their mind at this early age. Why is this such an important case to the other side?
So the other side looks at it this way. Here we have a child with a normal gender self-expression with his father and an abnormal gender self-expression with his mother. If they can get this child onto the childhood, well, I call it transgender child abuse, the childhood transition, it's called the Dutch protocol. If they can get this kid on it, they can get any kid on it. And that's kind of been their perspective on it. And I think that's why they've taken such an interest in it. Because this kid could go either way. He could have a normal life.
When he's with you, he's along the lines of his biological objective gender.
Absolutely. Yeah. Probably one of the funniest things that I've seen in this regard. I was interviewed actually by Russia Television 1. They came to my home with a camera crew and they interviewed me. And their question to me was, our Russian audience understands Texas is a very religious place. How could this be happening here? And it was kind of my role to explain that. And sort of the entryism of...
Well, please explain it to me too and to our audience, because I'm just as mystified as Russian television is, because this is a foreign country as far as I'm concerned.
I agree. It's there's a concerted attempt to destroy the traditional family.
Yes.
And if you go to any radical left meeting or group or any committee, it doesn't matter. They all talk about the destruction of the traditional family. They see it as oppressive. And the reason they see it oppressive is, in a sense, correct. The only thing standing against what I call the global homo agenda, right? This sort of uniformity globalist agenda, the only thing standing against it are traditional social structures in Europe and the United States. That's it.
Yeah.
And if they can destroy the family, all that goes away.
That's right. And
they've been trying very, very hard to do this. One of the really evil ways that happens in the United States is through what are called Title IV courts. So the federal government gives matching funds for the collection of child support to the states, and it's massive amounts of money.
They've incentivized it. The same way that they've incentivized civil asset forfeiture. Where
exactly.
The war on drugs, they steal property without finding somebody guilty of a crime, without even charging somebody with a crime.
That's right.
They've now incentivized the entire CPS issue, but even more specifically, this Title IV.
Yeah. What they do is... if one parent is paying child support and one parent has primary custody, the child support payments are maximized, and the payments to the state are therefore maximized. You see how it works?
They
have an incentive to do this.
To destroy the family.
In Texas and other states, the judicial retirement funds even come out of these matching funds. So the judges have a vested interest in ripping families apart and not giving fathers in particular equal time, because it's mostly fathers who pay child support.
So it's a financial incentive for the judges. They get their retirement.
That is correct. That is correct. And thousands of men are put in jail in county courts throughout Texas all the time under this law. And if you call the Texas Attorney General's office, I've done this because I've had My ex has denied me custody on many occasions. I've had to call the police. There's been a lot of stuff that's happened. So the Texas Attorney General office will not help you see your kids.
Mm-hmm.
They will bluntly, they have a script they read, and they're very blunt about it. They say it's not our job to help you see your kids. Our job is to collect child support. And they're right, because we get like $750 million in matching funds from the federal government. That's enough to fund the whole Attorney General's office.
Wow. Wow. So they have a financial incentive to do this,
Yes.
just as CPS does.
Yes.
And this is what we're seeing across the board. Now, you talk about this being an agenda to take away the family. And of course, we understand that the government has, for the longest time, I mean, going back to Plato, we got to get the kids away from the family because then they belong to the state. And we got to get over this idea, as Melissa Harris Perry told us, this idea that the children belong to you. They don't. They belong to the village. They belong to the state. And we go back and look at some of the seminal laws that created the CPS abuses. It goes back to Hillary Clinton, where it takes a village to take your child. Okay, so there's that dimension of it. There's a political dimension of it where they want to get the children at an early age, take them and raise them as the parents, with the state as the parents, and that goes all the way back to Plato's Republic. They understood that as a tactic. Yeah. But there's also a spiritual aspect of this as well, right? And this the destruction of the family, the destruction of humanity.
There is. It's so funny you mentioned that. I'm in a reading group. We're rereading the Republic right now, and we've just gotten to the part where he starts talking about the family. Yeah, the conflict here is irreconcilable between the two sides. It's really coming down to either you support traditional child rearing practices and raising boys as boys and girls, or you don't. And there's really no middle ground. Yeah. And we're going to have to recognize that making better arguments, raising awareness, getting angry are not the ways in which we're going to win this fight. We have to do all that. They're necessary, but they're not sufficient to winning. We have to look at how the left have won, I think. The left have a blueprint for how to win. What they've done, people call me a conspiracy theorist when I talk about it.
Well, hang on, because we're going to get to that in the next, how the left has won, because that is very important. How have we lost this? Why have we lost this? How have we lost our families? How have we lost our faith in God? Because, the government has to be God. The government has to be parent. They are not going to allow any competition from God or from our families. They want to be all in one, omnipotent, omniscient, omnipresent in our life. And so we'll be right back. SaveJames.com. We'll be right back. Tell us, Jeff, why have we lost? That's where we left off with this when we had to go to commercial break. Why have we lost in this fight?
Well, let's just think about how common sense what we're talking about is. In Texas, it's illegal for a kid to get a tattoo until they're 18. Parents can't even consent to it because it's a permanent thing for the child, and they need to be of age in order to make such a decision.
We don't let them vote to a certain age?
No.
We don't let them have sex until a certain age, at least for the moment.
But we'll cut their penis and their testicles off. It's just, it's really unbelievable. So we're just talking about something that's very common sense. How did the left win this? How did they get courts to go along with it? Why are the courts even taking this seriously? The left is not in a debate. And unfortunately, all the rest of us have been in a debate. We think that if we make better arguments, if we raise more awareness, it'll just change things. The left realized long ago that we are in a post-constitutional society, and they realized that long before most other people. And they realized that the levers of power in this country come from institutions. They don't come from the vote or any place else. So what they've done in my case, like in family court, they know that the conservative foundations, for example, religious foundations, will not enter family court. So I can't get any help in family court from any of the traditional foundations. Why is that? Because the family courts are totally lawless. In this case, the conservative foundations are right. The family courts are not constrained by statute or the Constitution. Almost every order that comes out of family court is unconstitutional, right? Prior restraints on speech are extremely common. The federal courts, if you get up to the federal courts, it takes you 15 years to get there out of state court. If you get up to federal courts,
and your child is grown up by
exactly, right. Yeah. When you get to federal court, they've always upheld that for any court, state court at all, to interfere in the parent-child relationship, they have to follow what's called a strict scrutiny due process test, which is the highest test that a court has to pass, the highest hurdle in order to interfere. And about the only way to do that is to say a child will be injured. So anything that's below neglect and child abuse, anything in there is, the court really isn't supposed to be manipulating anything. but they routinely impose their own views of child rearing. And here's how it works. The entryists, the LGBT entryists have gone into professional organizations like the American Psychological Association and systematically subverted them and turned them to their own policy agendas. And the reason they can do this is that the diagnostic criteria that are used by psychologists in the United States are created not by scientific methods, but are actually created by bureaucratic and democratic methods. They vote on it. So if they can construct enough institutional power, they can change all of the diagnostic recommendations. And what happens is when a psychologist comes into a family court, he's constrained by his profession's policies.
Wow.
And when he makes a recommendation in court, the family court judges are not going to overrule an expert. And so effectively, these professional organizations have the force of law in family court.
So if they can get in and get elected to being in a position of control of the American Psychological Association, then those politicized people, they can set policy, and no psychiatrist or psychologist can go against that.
That is correct. Or it's very, very difficult to do so.
Yeah, because you can get kicked out, right?
That's
your livelihood.
If you go to the blog at savejames.com, I have a whole article which lists the 7-step process by which they do this. Basically what they do is they take some abnormal behavior that goes against traditional family practices. They convert it into a status, from a behavior into a status. Then they attach rights to it, and then they use existing civil rights laws to force you to do what they want you to do. That's
Which is where they're coming now at us on a nationwide level. This is what Peter, I call him Buttigieg because I don't know how to pronounce his name, but that's what he's pushing now, along with Nancy Pelosi, the Equality Act. They are going to then turn this into a status. They're going to turn gender orientation into a status as race and sex work. Now, we know that those are biological and objective. You know, you have a certain skin color, you have a certain sex, but now they're going to take away the objectivity of that.
That's right.
And the purpose of that is to use that law to overturn what we all understand is a wrong-headed policy, just as we saw that Baker fight all the way to the Supreme Court and win at the Supreme Court. Because they lost all the way to the Supreme Court, they're now going to try to undo that with the so-called Equality Act. Well, I don't want equality. I want freedom and dignity.
Yeah, there's a difference between liberty and license, and we've understood that in this country for a long time. We really lost that distinction, right? The way this this kind of process works on the left, and the reason why the side that favors traditions, customs and traditions have been the bulwark of liberty throughout history, not laws, right?
Yes.
You can even make the argument that statutes aren't really laws. The customs and traditions are really the laws because that's how the laws are interpreted, right? So the way they do this is they really pick things that are crucial to our traditional practices to go after. And they've been very successful in reclassifying behavior as a status. So, for example, if you ask the rigorous objective biostatisticians, there's no evidence at all. It's just none that you can find to believe that a person could have a girl's brain in a boy's body. There's the scientific evidence does not support such a view. There's no neurological basis to say such things, but they're claimed over and over again all the time as though it's true, right? And in fact, we had an expert witness testify at the first hearing when she tried to remove my parental rights, and he said, put it in these stark terms, he said, "Do you want to be having this conversation with your child around a cemetery stone or around the kitchen table?" As though gender self-expression was something that was totally innate and immutable. Yeah. Whereas the American Psychological Association itself says that it's socially constructed by parents and peers. You teach a boy how to be a man. You teach a girl how to be a proper woman, right? Yeah. And we all recognize that there's a behavioral component to this, right? And now they're in this weird position where they have to affirm both, and they have a logical contradiction to resolve there.
Well, you have a wealth of information there at your site. Again, it is savejames.com. And as you can hear from Jeff Younger, he has been in the thick of this. His case is very important to both sides. He understands the foundation of this tyranny that is being rolled out to destroy our families, to destroy our culture, to destroy our rule of law. If you want to help him, there's a donation box there at savejames.com. But just go there and take a look at what he has gone through take a look at what he's talking about in terms of the larger legal, scientific, and social issues. He really does understand this issue, and we better understand it because we are losing our families and losing our country. Thank you so much for joining us, Jeff. Good luck to you.
Thank you for having me.
That's it for our program. Thank you for listening.